Jesus was going to have what they call the Last Supper. Okay. So that's when he went with his disciples. Now they go to celebrate Passover. Okay. Passover is a time, it's about this time of the year where they get together and they just remember what God did for the Jewish people, for the children of Israel when they left Egypt and began to leave to go back home. All right. And so that's what they were doing. They were having that time again. Now, for Jesus, it's a little bit different because now he knows this is the last time that he's going to be with them. Okay. And so we said that at first he sits down with them and does the washing of the feet. And then he sits down and he lets them know that someone is going to betray him tonight. Now, to betray somebody, let's see, if I had something that I only wanted Andrew to know. Okay. And I told Andrew, and I said, Andrew, I need you to kind of keep this to yourself. Okay. I don't want you to tell anybody else. It's not necessarily a secret. It was just something that I wanted to share only with Andrew. Okay. But then Andrew goes and he starts telling everybody else. Okay. That means that he has betrayed me. He has kind of broken that trust. All right. And so that's what's happening here. Judas Iscariot is one of Jesus' disciples. There were 12 of them. And so Judas is the one that says, no, I don't believe him anymore. I don't want to be with anymore. So I want something better. So he leaves the group. We know that Jesus still stays with them. He has told Judas, whatever you're going to do quickly, because there's a timing for everything. So Judas goes and he goes and sees the high priest. And so they trade. He gets money for telling them where Jesus is going to be. So they're taking care of a plan over there. Whereas here, Jesus is now sitting down with the rest of his disciples. 12 minus 1. That's 11. Okay. So he's sitting down with them and he begins. We talked about how he shared the bread with them, how they passed it around and each took a piece of bread. And he said, when you eat this, you remember my body. Now, again, we're not eating his body. It's just a way of remembering what Jesus was going to do. Again, these disciples still have no idea what's about to come. So they're still kind of wondering what's going on as well as Jesus says this. And then they pass the drink around and he says, as you drink this, I want you to remember about my blood. Now, again, remember, you know that Jesus is about to die on the cross. They did not. So they really weren't sure of everything that was going on, but they were still listening and following. Now, after that, then they leave there. And I guess it was the custom for them, or at least it was what Jesus wanted to be done, was he says, I want you to go out with me. So they go to what's called the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, it was just a place kind of set aside where they could have just a garden area, some trees and bushes and things. That's where they went. And that's where Jesus wanted to go. And so as they go, the idea was that they would do a little singing as they went, and then they gather around. Now, Jesus tells them, now this is later at night. I would say by this time, most people are already in their homes and they're done with their day. They're getting ready for bed, those kinds of things. Now, the disciples with Jesus, they've been up all day long. And so they're a little on the tired side. Normally this would be, okay, let's get ready for bedtime. But Jesus wanted to go out. And so that's what they do. Now, he goes out for prayer. He takes with him, now, all 11 disciples come with him, but he takes Peter, James, and John a little bit separate from everybody else. He says, I want you three to come with me. And he goes a little bit aside and he says, I want you to sit here and I need you to pray for me. Jesus knew that something terrible was about to happen. And in his body, he needs to be ready for what's going to take place because it was going to be a lot. And so he needs to get his strength and encouragement. So he asked those three disciples. Now, I'm sure those disciples were supposed to be praying. And then he takes Peter, James, and John aside. And he says, I need you to really pray for me. So they, oh, yes. I imagine that they sat down and they started getting ready to pray. And Jesus goes off and he begins to pray. And so he's praying a long time and just really talking to God the Father about what's about to happen, because it's going to be a lot. We know what Jesus goes through. We know all the pain and suffering that he has, and how there were going to be so many people that were going to be against him and saying things terrible about him and doing terrible things to him. And he was going to, now remember, he's always God. And so he had that power to stop everything, but yet he was going to need all that encouragement to not stop it. He was going to have to take all of that. We know that he felt pain just like we did. And so he didn't have to feel it. We talked back way back at the beginning of the year, when Jesus first starts his ministry, Satan takes him and tries to get him to do different things, and even takes him to the top of the temple and says, throw yourself off. Everybody will know who you are. And of course, Jesus says, no. The Bible says that even the angels would stop his even toe from hitting a rock. And so we know that Jesus could stop any bad thing from happening to him at the time. So he was going to need the encouragement to do this. This was going to be a lot that he was going to have to face for you and me. And so he needed that prayer time, that encouragement, that talking to God. And so he did. Now, when he finished praying, he goes back and he sees the disciples. But do you notice what's happening? They've started off praying, but at some point, they just kind of slipped off and they went to sleep. And so they're sleeping. And Jesus goes over and he wakes them up. Hey. Couldn't you have even sat with me for an hour? I need your encouragement. Now, I imagine that they woke themselves back up. And Jesus goes again for the second time, and he starts to pray again. And then when he finishes, he goes back, and they're asleep again. He doesn't wake them up this time, but he does go back. And he prays. The Bible says that he begins to pray even harder, because the Bible says that he begins to sweat drops of blood. That simply meant that he was praying so hard and that he was talking to God so hard in such a way that he was sweating, but it was coming out in drops of blood. Interesting, different. And then he finished. He got the encouragement that he needed. It was enough time. He had the encouragement that he needed from God by spending that time with him in prayer, that he got up and he went over and he woke them again. Y'all need to get up. They're here for me. Now, at first, the disciples don't really probably understand. They've been asleep. If I was somebody come in to wake me up, the first thing I'm going to do, whoa, what's going on? What's going on? Because here comes, as they sit up, and of course it's dark out, so there's no electricity, there's no street lights or anything. But as they sit up and it's really, really dark around, they can see there's a light coming, and they can hear that there's a lot of people coming as well. And they look up, what's going on? What's happening? You see, up to this point, the disciples have been really careful to try to keep Jesus safe, because their religious leaders are after Jesus, and they want to do away with him. They've been trying to arrest him. They have plans to kill him. And so they've been trying to protect Jesus and keep him away. And the crowds have at this point gotten so large coming to see Jesus that he really doesn't go into the city very much either. And so as the disciples sit up in the dark of the night and they see this, whoa, what's going on? And out in front is Judas. Judas had made arrangements with the religious leaders. How will we know? If you're going to tell us where he is, how will we know which one is him? What if one of the other men comes out? Because they're not necessarily going to go. They're going to send some people to go. Well, what if somebody else says that he's Jesus, and we take the wrong person? And so Judas said, well, I will give you a sign. I'm going to do something so that you'll know exactly which one it is. And so the Bible says that when he comes up to the crowd, as the crowd comes up to Jesus, Judas comes out up front, and he comes to Jesus and he grabs hold of him and kind of gives him a hug. And the Bible says, kissing him on the cheek. Now, no, icky. Okay, just like a friendly, they're like brothers. Okay, now I know Andrew and Alexander do not kiss each other, but they're like brothers. It's family. When I haven't seen my family in a while, I'm going to grab them, I'm going to hug them, I'm going to kiss them, I'm going to say, yay. This is the relationship that they were supposed to have had. And so Judas, he comes in and he kisses Jesus, and right away they now everybody in the crowd, the soldiers that are there and the other leaders that are there, they know exactly who it is, who they're after. And Jesus says, why are you betraying me with a kiss? Now, I think at that point, I think Judas kind of draws back in the crowd, because I think other people are coming up and they're starting to kind of go around. And I think Judas realizes, whoa, I've done something. And so I think he kind of draws back. The other disciples that are there, they're kind of, getting around Jesus and, what's happening? What's going on? What's going to happen in all of this? And Jesus asked the question. He says, who are you looking for? And they say, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, I am he. And the Bible says that the crowd just kind of falls back, kind of fall down on the ground. All he said was, I am he. But the power that was in those 3 words, it really made them just kind of be in awe and kind of come back and just get away. And then they sit up and they say, um, and it's like seconds. It's like all of it seems to happen at the same time. The Bible says that, and this is what I picture in my mind. The Bible says that when they stand up, that I can see them kind of going and getting closer to him, like in almost like in slow motion, that they're going to go and they're going to grab Jesus. But the disciples, one in particular by the name of Peter steps forth. And again, all of this happened so fast. Peter steps forth. There was a man that must have been really close to Jesus. Now, the Bible says that his name was Malchus. And so he must have been really, really standing close to Jesus, because the Bible says that Peter, I imagine, kind of steps in front of Jesus, grabs a sword from someone, lifts it up, and he chops the side of Malchus's head, cuts his ear right off, and the ear falls down to the ground. And now, you've got Jesus, you've got his disciples, you've got Judas somewhere in the mix, you've got all of these soldiers, these Roman soldiers that are going to come. They're bringing all of these strong men just to take Jesus. And there's probably some of the leaders, some of the religious leaders that are part of this. And so, and all of the speed and fastness that's going on. Okay, so the men go to take Jesus. Peter jumps in front, takes that sword, cuts off the ear. Now, you're talking seconds, because that means that a fight is about to break off. Because when Peter grabs this sword and cuts off the ear of this man, he's immediately grabbing his ear, and you can imagine he's screaming and he's painful, and there's blood everywhere, and there's his ear. I mean, if my ear fell on the ground, I would go insane. And so all of this is happening so fast. And so I can imagine that the Roman soldiers that are standing around, they're grabbing, and they're going to, and there's going to be a battle right there. And all of these people are going to die. These disciples that are with Jesus, it's going to be over with and done. And so Peter, I mean, without even thinking, he just does this. And then Jesus just leans over. I don't know, maybe he held up his hand. I don't know, maybe he stopped everybody from moving. But Jesus, the Bible says, leans over, picks up that ear, holds it up to the head of that man Malchus, and then takes his hand away. And his ear is just fine. Now, I imagine there's still some mid over on his shoulder, but his ear is back where it belongs. Just like that. In a matter of seconds, that happens. And then I think everyone's just kind of standing for just a second or two. I mean, I would say that probably within 10 seconds, all of this happens. It's so fast. But Jesus says, you're not going to take me. I'm going to go with you, because this is what needs to be done. And with that, the soldiers put their hands on Jesus and lead him away. Now, the disciples, they get scared. Jesus had told them at that table that he was going to be leaving them soon. And when he did leave them, that they were going to be scared and they were going to run away, but it would be okay. Now, immediately, Peter jumps up and he says, no, I will be with you. I will stay with you. I will stay with you no matter what. I will defend you. I will help you. And Jesus tells him, before the rooster, the Bible says before the cock crows, but that means before the rooster crows, you will have denied me 3 times. Now, they didn't quite understand what all was going to happen, but at that point, when Jesus is taken away, the disciples get scared. What's going on? What's going to happen to me? And they run and hide and run off, including Peter. And they just kind of run. Now, there's a couple of disciples that kind of follow along, Peter being one of them. He does kind of follow on, but more in the shadows, not up with Jesus in the group. And they're taking Jesus. Now, where they take Jesus, we'll have to come back another day and find out what happens. See you tomorrow.